Hi there, everyone, and welcome again to the From Desk to Dynasty podcast. As always, I'm your host, Owen, and I'm here with a very special guest, Luis. So, super excited to sit down with them, hear about what he's got going on right now, share his insights, experiences, absolutely everything. So, without further ado, Luis, I'll pass it across to you for a quick introduction, my friend.
Hey Owen, how are you? It's wonderful to be here. I greatly appreciate you giving me the time. So I'm Luis or Luis Derechin, however it is. I born in Mexico and then raised in the U.S. So I answered to both. I am lifelong, or what some people would call serial entrepreneur. I've started a bunch of companies. First one being when I was 18 years old, an import-export company. We can get into that later. In the early 2000s, I founded Mexico's first tech startup ever to get U.S. venture capital funding. Moved to the U.S., was CEO of the company, ran it until its eventual acquisition about a decade and change later. And my current venture is a nearshore staffing company. So what we do is we work with U.S. companies in order to provide them with remote staff from Latin America, saving them 60 to 70% and allowing them to get their pick of just amazing talent that you can find in Latin America.
Awesome. A very decorated career. So super excited to sit down with you, Lewis. Just to jump straight in, you know, could you maybe, and I know there's a lot to explain here, but if we're looking at more so the nearshore recruitment company and the formation of that, could you maybe share a little bit about your journey into that? And I guess what drew you to that industry, you know, having done a couple of different things before so?
Sure, it's an interesting journey. I think it was Steve Jobs, right, that said sort of you don't make the connection points looking forward, you sort of make them looking back, right? So I can't tell you that there was any strategic thought into the current position, but let me sort of give you a bit of history about
Please.
me, and I'll actually kick off on the fact that I founded the first Mexican tech company to get U.S. venture capital funding. So imagine this, if you will. This is 2001, 2002. My brother and I had, were working on software. One of the very early innovators in the Web 2.0 space. I'm so old that most people don't even know what Web 2.0 is, but that's another story. So, we got a call from a venture capital firm, Intel Capital and Darby Technology Ventures, and we got a call from them. They had learned about what we were doing. That was very cool. And over the period of a couple months, we agreed that we would take $2.5 million in funding in order to grow the company. So great news that this
Yeah.
is awesome. But part of the strategic plan was great. You guys have expanded in the Mexican market, but the biggest market in the world is the U.S. So rather than staying in Mexico, let's move to the U.S. So I moved to the U.S. Washington D.C. is where I decided that the headquarters is going to be, and then we have to figure out how to hire a head of sales, a head of marketing, sort of the typical ramp up, if you will, for any venture backed company. And then I'm sitting there looking at the Excel, and on one side you have $2.5 million, and on the other you have your projected cash flows, and something just didn't make sense. It wasn't going to go very far, right? If you have to pay your head of sales back in the early 2000s, 180,000, right? And any developer, 120,000 to 150,000 plus benefits, plus health insurance, plus all these things. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there looking at my spreadsheet, and I'm panicking because I don't have very long runway, and the thing that scares an entrepreneur more than anything else is the lack of time, right? Because if you don't have time, then you can't react. So long story short is I sort of come to the conclusion that we can't build out our team in the US. We're going to have to make do with the team back in Mexico that we had, and then slowly but surely, as we gain more traction in the U.S., build out the team, right? Which completely makes sense from a business point of view, but is kind of counterintuitive, and even more than for a venture-backed company. So early 2000s, right? There was no high bandwidth internet in Mexico still, right? It was just coming into fruition. Even in the U.S., it wasn't as prevalent. And we decided to have a remote team working for us in Mexico. Fortunately, same time zone, so we were able to work correctly, coordinate correctly, and then over time sort of built out the team in Mexico, and as we gained more traction in the U.S., it did that as well. So it's a long way of saying what we're now promoting is really based on what we did.
Yeah.
10 years later, companies acquired, on my way to quote unquote retirement, and then I start getting phone calls from colleagues, from peers, CEOs who had heard about what we had done in having a large part of our development in Latin America, and they start asking if we can help them do this. First few ones, sort of did us favors, free, and then after a while realized, there's an opportunity here, there's a need, right?
Yep.
Because people want to be able to hire resources or developers or accountants, and we'll get into the different types of resources, but they want to be able to hire people at lower cost and get people that are better quality. That's sort of what we've been doing ever since, Owen.
Super, super interesting. I know, because like right now, it seems so obvious that, we can have employees and teams sort of scattered all over the place, but back then, definitely not the case. And obviously for yourself, Luis, you understood the talent that was out there in, for your example, in Mexico. You knew how good it was and you knew they could get the job done. How hard was it, coming to these VCs and saying, hey, this is what I want to do? Did they take that well, or did they question you? Like, what was that conversation like?
I don't think it was questioned much, and it wasn't questioned as much because we were from Mexico. So, we had a team in Mexico. So for us, it was natural sort of to grow the team. Two very different conversations, coming to a board and saying, hey guys, we're going to sort of ditch the hiring in the U.S. and hire in Mexico, and then people questioning, do you know how to hire? Do you know how to manage? Do you know all these things? And can you do it remotely? Versus the fact that we sort of started in that mode. For us, it was easy to keep hiring engineers and other positions in Mexico without actually having the strategic conversation about no U.S. and Mexico. And then again, slowly after a year or so, we sort of built out the U.S. team, and then the investors realized as long as we have good conversations between the teams and good coordination, then there is no problem where they're situated.
For sure. And this is maybe just a question through my own curiosity. How were you communicating cross borders at that time? Because obviously I'm going to assume there's no Microsoft Teams, there's obviously no Zoom. How does that happen? Is it all over mobile, phone call? How does that work?
So what we did have is we didn't have video conference. True, we
Yeah.
didn't have Microsoft Teams, but there was the possibility to have j- conference bridges, right? So there were we did it over Skype, right, which is the early precursor. It's not going away, but still we have Skype. And then we had another company called Vonage, Vonage, that was a long distance provider over internet. So through both of those, and then conference bridges, and we wouldn't see each other, but we would speak to each other, right? So we did have the possibility of jumping on calls and doing all those things, and then frankly, a lot of back and forth. So my brother was heading technology. He didn't move to the U.S. until much later. So the fact that he was in Mexico allowed for that communication to happen with the team. I was in the U.S. basically alone, and the fact that I was in the U.S., I would travel back and forth. I think I would spend 1 week out of every month here in Mexico, and then 3 weeks in the U.S. So, not saying it was easy, but
Yeah,
you know,
you
sort
made
of
it work.
found a way.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, it's super interesting because, as I say, I can just imagine back then it's definitely wouldn't have been the done thing. So yeah, hats off to you saying this is what we're going to do. This is what we know will work, and yeah, it's led you to where you're at now. So super impressive stuff.
Thank
I
you.
mean, when it comes to obviously that's a bit of the background of what led you towards, this new venture or not so new venture, but this venture that you're working on now, and that you're building out successfully. If you could walk me through, the early stages of that firm. I sort of understand the original vision. It was like, we've done this before, we know it works. But how has that sort of evolved over time? As the landscape's changed a little bit, post-COVID times, everything like that. Has it made your life easier now that remote working is, so widespread?
So the answer is yes and no. And the reason why I say that, like anything, is certainly pioneers are the ones that walk around with arrows on their backs, right? Or at least the ones to prove it. Once the market has sort of accepted a premise, then it's great news, because theoretically you can now sell into this willing market. But the other part is the barriers to entry in the nearshore staffing game are very low, right? I mean,
Yep.
think about this. Anyone who has worked for me or for any other staffing company can put out their shingle tomorrow and basically call themselves a nearshore staffer, and just sort of fly by the seat of their pants, and some will be successful and some won't. So, increase demand, but also increase supply. And now, whereas before it was difficult to convince someone of the merits of doing this, maybe today the difficulty is the opposite, whereas a lot of companies are thinking, hey, I can get talent in Latin America. There's no need to convince them of this, but they think they can do this on their own, or they think they can, using LinkedIn recruit and manage as consultants and whatnot, or just get a guy that they know, right? Some guy that they met somewhere, and have them do this. So the challenges had changed from one of education, right? Education
Yep.
about the merits of hiring remotely in Latin America, to one that now it's about making sure that who you hire, the way you hire them, the way you manage them, the way you treat them, is sort of in the best way possible, because it's sort of like marriage, right? I mean, once you marry someone, you have to live with them. Well, it's the same for an
Yeah.
employee, right? Once you hire them, well, great news, but now you have to manage them, live with them, pay them, do all those things. Therefore, getting to your question, the way that we have evolved is we've created a framework, and it's called the Remote Intelligence Framework. Remote being an acronym, and I'll get to what the different letters are. But for us, remote intelligence, through 20 odd years of doing this, is the framework that we've agreed on, or sort of came to being, in order to better find people, better manage people, and make sure that you get the best results from your remote talent.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I would love to hear more about a breakdown of the remote, because I think it really touches into, the challenges, as you said, not so much more of acceptance of this is a thing that we can do, more so of how do we do it, and how do we do it correctly, and how do we do it in a way that's going to breed success for our clients. So yeah, it'd be great to dive into, your remote system and exactly, the fine nuances of how that really works.
Glad to do so. So before we get into what remote intelligence is, let me first give you another acronym. And this acronym, we coined this acronym to sort of tell you what the lay of the land is today for the staffing game, right? And we call it the toxic model. And toxic, five letters. T is for transactional recruiting. right? So a lot of these companies, as I said, they just put out their shingle and think that they can go on LinkedIn and find someone. So, a company sends them a job description, and they look for senior job engineer. Great. Here's Lewis, right? Lewis can do a great job for you. We don't think this is transactional. It has to be, with it's more nuanced than that, right? It takes a lot more skill to find the person, make sure that it's the right person. But anyways, so transactional recruiting is for T. Obscure pricing model is the O. So if you think about it, a lot of staffing companies basically say, we'll charge you X dollars per hour, and then in those, give me just one second. I'm getting these WhatsApp messages that I'm going to shut. I forgot to shut those. Sorry.
You're all good. You're all good.
All right.
It's the life of a busy entrepreneur, my friends.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So the O is for obscure pricing model. A lot of staffing companies basically charge. Oh my God. Can you see the messages?
We can't see that. We can't see
Okay.
it.
All right. So then I'll just ignore them. My apologies. The O is for obscure pricing model. A lot of staffing companies basically charge on an hourly basis or on a monthly basis, and it's a black box. These people thinking that because they're going to charge lower rates, they don't have to be transparent with what they do, with what they pay, right, and how much they charge. So imagine, if you will, you hire that senior Java developer, and because you're paying $10,000 in the US, someone comes to you and says, "Great news, Owen. You can hire a Java senior developer for 6,000 or 7,000." And you're saying, they're saying, "Wow, I'm going to save 30-40%." But it turns out that the staffing company is only paying that senior Java engineer 3,000. So they're getting the majority of the bounty for themselves. It sort of misaligns the benefits to the person that's actually doing the work, because the staffing companies agree. So the obscured pricing model is the second one. The X is for Xeroxed talent approach, right? You do the same thing for every company. It doesn't matter if the company is a early stage startup, a second time founder that is scaling. You think, or staffing companies think, that they can just throw bodies at the problem and solve every problem the same way. We found that doesn't work, and most of our clients have found that doesn't work. The I is for inadequate integration. So they just say, "Owen, here's Lewis. Lewis, here's Owen. Go at it," right? Well, again, it should be dealt with a little differently, but the way staffing companies deal with it that way. And then lastly, it's the cost-driven decision making, and what we mean by that is the staffing companies prioritize margins over quality and fit. So that toxic model isn't really working, right? Sure, it was great when you could save companies 90% or think huge margins, and then a lot of rework would be done. So what we've come up with is the remote intelligence framework, and remote is an acronym, and it's sort of the antithesis of toxic. So R is for rigorous talent selection. We have to make sure that the person that we find has to be the right person for the right job for the right culture. So very rigorous. The E is for expert onboarding and support. Right. Once a person is selected, we have to go through a process to make sure that the person is onboarded correctly, becomes part of the team. So more of a strategic relationship, right? What you're hearing is not transactional, but more strategic. The M is for managed support and services. And what that means is, we have to play a part in ensuring that the person that is working remotely has the right support in order to be able to deliver. Whether that's they need equipment, they need software, they need office, they need benefits, they need all sorts of different support. The O is for optimized team performance. Put together, work with our customers to create the right environment, the right metrics, the right everything in order for these people to hit them. The T is for transparent cost plus pricing. So our business model, instead of being a black box, we're radically transparent. We will basically say to our customer, this is Jose, and Jose wants to make this much. And if you want to pay benefits, it'll be this much. And we will arrange or agree on a flat fee, not a percentage, mind you, but a flat fee of a few $100 that we bill them. I mean, we have to make our living, and then B, we actually provide, we believe, and our customers, have sort of proven a lot of value. However, we shouldn't be charging more than the person that is doing the work. So we take, a few $100, and the person doing the work understands that all of the money decisions are made by the end customer, and the end customer understands how much this person is making to ensure that they make a fair wage, they make everything. Therefore, there's perfect alignment between these two parties, and all we are is a support system, right? So yes, we found the person and then we provide all this support, but our value is sort of level set against the value of the resource and the company doing work. Transparency is really difficult because a lot of companies don't want to sort of show their cards, but our philosophy is if you don't do it that way, then again, it's toxic and it's not going to work. And then lastly, if you do the REMOT correctly, what companies are going to get is enhanced scalability and growth. So the E is for enhanced scalability and growth. I hope that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, my friend. And yeah, when we previously spoke, you didn't actually tell me about the toxic acronym. So super interesting to hear, the sort of juxtaposition between how they compare. And I think you with the remote model and the toxic as well, you touch upon a lot of points in what I believe is, a big downfall of the recruitment and staffing industry today, where it's very much a case of, contingent, bums on seats. How quickly can we get someone in and pass them over to you? Whereas like with that, lifetime value of a client can tend to be pretty small, your quality drops massively, and yeah, you're just not actually providing value. So yeah, I think you're definitely to a winner with that for sure.
Thank
And
you.
my next question was going to be like, obviously recruitment's a competitive space. What do you think has been your edge? But I think I don't even need to ask that question because I think we've touched upon exactly what is your edge in business. And yeah, super clear how it's working and how
You,
it's
you know,
going.
uh, so even though it's clear, I'll sort of just play on that for a second,
Please.
if you allow me. And I think that there's a difference between I'll just call them generically first time founders and second time founders, right? First time founders are sort of most, at least this was my case. I'm not talking about anyone else. I will personalize this fully.
Yep.
When I was telling you about everything that happened to me when I got the funding and tried to grow my company, I was sort of managing by the seat of my pants, right? It's like being a test pilot. You've never done this before. You've never flown this airplane. So, what do I do, right? Which switch do I toggle? What lever do I move? So because of that, you tend to get into the fantasy of I'm going to create this unicorn, and because there's going to be ample funding and everyone's going to want to work for me, my venture's going to be the next Facebook or the next whatever, and we all sort of get wrapped up into this fantasy where we're sort of managing for this hyper growth, but hyper growth doesn't come to everyone.
Yeah.
Second time founders or more experienced founders understand that cash is king, right? Runway is life, right? And the more time you get to figure out product market fit, then the chances of you not only surviving but being successful are higher. So a lot of our messaging goes to those expert or more experienced founders. So rather than us convincing them that cash is king, they already know it. So when they hear about the remote intelligence framework, it just makes way more sense to them. We don't have to go through a whole, huge conversation about it. So our edge is we believe in strategic partnerships with our clients, not transactional. We follow the remote framework along with our client partners, right? Because we're both looking to align our success with each other. And if we can do that, then that's really where our edge is.
Amazing, amazing. As I say, I mean, I didn't personally think about it before really sitting down and speaking with you, Louise, but it does just make perfect sense. And it's like a client's dream, right? It's like who doesn't want to work with someone where they're on the exact same page? But yeah, I mean, you're clearly building something super, super incredible. And I'm always, fascinated by how successful leaders are thinking about the future. If you say, looking ahead over the next 12 to 24 months, what are the biggest growth priorities for yourself, even personally, and also the business?
Uh, so, a lot of challenges,
Yeah.
and I'm not giving away any secrets about artificial
Of course.
intelligence, right? I mean, how is artificial intelligence going to majorly disrupt the software market, the CSR market, the SDR market? Um, a lot of the work that is today assigned for remote people to do is sort of lower level, or right, or more transactional work. So, how is AI going to impact that? That's a big question. And then B, can we transmit the strategic nature of what we do versus the more toxic or transactional vendors? So, certainly huge challenges, but as with anything, with any challenging situation, that there are also big opportunities. So for myself and for my company, continue to grow, continue to see how we can provide more value. Um, you know, Growth is a lagging indicator, right? Profits are a lagging indicator. You do everything correctly, and well, not everything, but as long as you do most things correctly, or most of your decisions are taken in a way that creates positive momentum, then you're going to get the growth. You're going to get the profits. So for us, it's about continuing to get the word out about remote intelligence, making sure that more companies understand that there's a different way to do this. And if we can do that, then the company will grow. And then personally, I'm sort of at a stage in life where, I've kids who are grown and getting married and finishing college and doing all those things. So, back to the lagging indicator, one would hope, at least I hope, that the education that we've given them, the upbringing, the family values, all those things are going to sort of turn out in the best possible way where we see our kids successful, growing families, or at least building families and whatnot. And then lastly, as the we get closer to the end buzzer in life, or the end whistle. Buzzer is more a basketball analogy. So given that we're in Latin America, I'll talk about football, right? Soccer, football. Um, then the end whistle, health, right?
Of course.
So mental health and physical health, and just making sure that one doesn't put on weight, and has the mental clarity and whatnot. I will just one additional thing that I'll state is, and part of this growth is also getting the word out on what we do.
Yeah.
What we do is a secret recipe, but the reality is it's not secret. I mean, everything I just went through in the remote acronym makes sense, right? It's logical. So one of the things that I've taken up, and my company, with the support of everyone here near you, is wrote a book about the remote intelligence framework. So if someone wants to sort of take on the REMOT, in order to see the enhanced scalability and growth, and doesn't want to hire near you, that's fine. God bless. They can do this. Buy the book. Right? Buy the book. See more in depth what it's like with use cases, with further study. The book will be publishing end of May 2025. Um, well, it's called The Nearshore Edge: How Smart Companies Scale with Latin American Talent, and then it goes through, the entire acronym. So that's sort of what's on my plate for the next 12 to 24 months.
100% a busy man at all times. I know I'll most certainly be buying the book when it does, hit the shelves. So
Thank you.
super excited to pick that up and really dig in a lot more deeper into, remote and everything that there is to know about it. Again, we don't have to touch too important on it, but I think sorry, too much on it, but I think it's important to note, like, you mentioned it, and I think it's where a lot of recruitment and staffing agencies are. It's almost like sink or swim right now. Personally, I think there's been three big shifts over, the last 20, 30 years. You mentioned it yourself and you were in the midst of it. Web 2. So internet, like, yeah, massive. Then you've got social media. I think social media was the next big shift in terms of like people didn't really know how to leverage it when it first came out. Now personal brand is huge. And yeah, right now we're stepping into that AI sphere, which can be mind-boggling and super, super hard to navigate if you don't have the people in place and you don't know what you're doing with it. So, yeah, I think touching upon super, super important points there. I guess with that, and without going into too much detail if you don't want to, the number one thing that if you could improve it, whether that be from an operational standpoint or just anything, if you could improve one thing in your business that would have the biggest impact on its growth, what do you think that would be if you could put your finger on it?
So it's like most people or most businesses in that it's about people, process, right, and then results, right. So in my experience, a lot of business owners, CEOs, entrepreneurs are looking to hire what I'll call the dragon employee, right? Other people call the unicorn employee. So they're always looking to, I'm going to hire that one person that is going to,
Yeah.
make this change. And I call it a dragon because ultimately, that that they're looking for this person to have this impermeable shield and breathe fire, right? In order to, you know, a defend the treasure, and then be able to go out and and conquer new lands and whatnot. They don't create the processes. They don't create the systems. Thinking this dragon of employee is going to take us to the promised land. And for my business and for every other business, I think it's more about making sure that each and everything that has to be done is process based. You create the processes, you create the systems, and then you hire the people to run those. Now there's a problem in what I just said, and it's if wages are such where you can't hire experts to do each thing and then to manage the different processes, that's really where the dragon mentality comes in, because you're sitting there thinking, wow, if I have to pay $220,000 for X being the next role that you're going to hire, this person better be the dragon, because otherwise I can't afford it. So for us, what we're doing is, because we ourselves hire in Latin America, we can find 3 employees to do the job of that one dragon employee, and yet he won't be a dragon. But can we find an armadillo with the the scales in order to defend the treasure? So there's the armadillo. Certainly, can we find a person that breathes fire? Probably not. But can you find a cobra that can spit venom far enough in order to help? So probably not a great analogy, but can you find 3 different employees who together, once you match them and make sure that they're all collaborating and cooperating, make up that dragon, that desired dragon employee? The only way you can do that is by finding talented people to whom you can pay less, finding people that are well aligned with the company's vision, right? And then, finding the right expertise. And if you can do those things and have them create the right processes and systems, then you'll be all set. Those are our challenges, and that's how we're trying to grow. And I think that's how most companies, again, second-time founders, probably not first-time founders, they have plenty of funding, and and they're trying to compete with the FANG companies for salaries and whatnot. Everyone throwing around stock options, but what percentage of the market is that, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I can even speak personally to that. So, my first venture was, pardon me, marketing agency. Super basic stuff, pretty starter business. With that though, I mean, there's the problems. We scaled pretty fast at the beginning, but what we didn't do was we didn't have the back end systems in place. So we scaled fast, we didn't have people, and we didn't have systems. But what we do have is a bunch of clients. And now we're thinking back, it's like, okay, how we've got all these people in our hands that have paid us money. How do we fix this problem? Yeah, literally, you're on your feet. You're like, oh my god, like
It's
what do we do?
it's the oh shit moment,
Yeah, exactly,
right?
exactly. And it's hard to navigate, especially as you said, being that first time founder, where it's like pulling your hair out up till midnight trying to work things out. And now I understand why it makes sense to, target these second time founders because they have went through that. So I know for myself when I started, the second business, it was a case of, okay, let's get everything in line and let's get everything in check before we actually, really try and scale this thing and move things on. And I think we in the marketing agency were big proponents of, obviously I didn't know about remote before speaking to yourself, Lewis, but we hire mostly in Latin America. So we have, a couple of employees in Mexico, a couple in Colombia, and the talent is really amazing. I think as well these people are really they're able to come in and align with the company culture and align with your values, and they work super hard. So yeah, I think so much value out there that maybe people are sleeping on slightly. So yeah, I think as I say, definitely onto something. But yeah, I mean, just on the whole challenges and everything like that. On the flip side, are there any strategies or ideas that you have tried in the last year that you found to be interesting, even if they maybe didn't play out quite the way that you expected them to?
You know, the marketing today, in the age of social media, you touched on this, right?
Yep.
In the age of influencers or whatnot, uh, is very different than it was, even a few years ago. Um, and most people think, again, you turn on a camera, you do your little TikTok dance, or you're on Instagram and you tell people your value proposition, and that's it, right? On to the promised land. And you and your marketing agency better than I know that nothing could be further from the truth. You need to, similar to everything that I just said in remote. I'm sure that you guys have your frameworks, right? And you have the rules and the systems and processes that must be followed in order to be successful. Um, Certainly knowledgeable, at least in the basic blocking and tackling, as they say, of how to make an impact in marketing. But with the changes and everything, it's been tough. So the level of investment in people, in tools, in time, podcasts and LinkedIn and all these things is incredible. So we have been attempting to be more active in the world of social media posts, whatnot, YouTube, Instagram, in order to be able to get the word out. Some of it is working, some of it isn't, but like anything, if you can have a trusted advisor, right, such as yourselves, who know what they're doing, take the marketing aspect, the messaging market, and do all those things. So I would say the biggest mistakes that we've made recently are in the marketing world, but
Yeah.
the if you don't make mistakes, then then you can't make progress. So having, looking back, I would almost say this is uh, eating your own home cooking, so to speak. It's having an expert help us in doing these things is certainly something that could have added value and will add value from here on out.
For sure, because it can be such a complex thing to navigate, especially in, I think, recruitment and staffing, a reasonably old school, traditional industry that people are, they have their ways of going around things and they tend to stick to that. So yeah, I think, and you are currently, implementing everything around that, so making amazing strides. But yeah, definitely super important, even in your more traditional industries.
If I could, everything you just said about recruiting and staffing, one could say about marketing. But
Yeah.
the reality is, it's not. So, the marketing game or the advertising game hasn't changed a lot. It's about getting your message out. It's about having people understand your value. It's about all those things. True. However, it's changed enormously because how you do that, right? Attention spans have gone from 90 seconds to 7 seconds. So having an expert that can, whittle down a message and get it down to a 6 second, blurb instead of a, long explanation where you have, a well-known actor proponent telling you about the value. So same challenges are there for the staffing world. It's on the outside, it hasn't changed much. Oh, but it has. The battle for talent has increased. The value for attention in the marketing world has changed. It's advanced. So most industries are silently advancing, which is why being able to work with an expert, right? Whether it's in marketing with a marketing advertising agency, lead generation agency, or experts. Let's take away agency and talk about experts is important, and we believe the same for staffing.
100%, 100%. As I say, it's marketing, as you say, it's always been the same and it will always will be the same. It's simply sales to the masses. That's all it is. Same as recruitment. It's always been the same and it always will be the same. How can we find amazing talent to put into companies to move them forward?
Right.
Like that, the overall arching theme of both industries is never, ever going to change. It's just how do we change the process and how do we change how we get that message across and how we do what we do to allow us to do it at a higher level. And I
Agreed.
think it's so important to understand that. But no, Lewis, again, just sort of, coming to an end here and wrapping up a little bit, I guess, you've had a very decorated career, done a load of amazing things, obviously now working on the book as well that's pretty much just about to go out in just under a month. What has been for you personally in business, what's been the most rewarding part of your journey as a founder or a leader so far? I know that's some amazing things, but it'd be great to understand, what was that one thing that you're like, yeah, that was amazing.
Growth and development for people.
Yeah,
I have when we hired people 20 years ago, you sort of you see this glimmer in their eye, right? Or this competitive streak, and you hire people that you think are going to help your company grow, and they do, but then their post career or their real career after they've gone to other heights is amazing. We have people who previously worked with us that are now founders, CEOs,
yeah,
high level executives at other places. To me, that's one of the most enriching things because to me at least, it shows that A, the people we chose were the right people. B, what we learned together, I won't say taught them, because ultimately it's not about that, but it's about what we learned together made sense so much so that they were able to expand their career. So, it's a bad analogy, but sort of when you have your kids, right? And then you see them grow and then be independent and flourish. That's all you could hope for. So it's the same for as a founder. It's for your company, and it's the same for your employees or colleagues or all those things. As I look back, at least on my life, all I could hope for is for my children to be good people, for them to be successful. Same for the companies that I founded, and same for the people that I worked with. And if we can achieve that, then it means that we did something right.
100%. That's the true north, and I think it's such an important thing to know as well when you say, it's nothing really personal to you. It's like how what I love the most is how much I've helped other people.
Correct.
Because without your input, they may very well not be in the same position that they're in today. They may very well not have had that same opportunity. So I think it's an amazing way to look at it. And yeah, I guess looking back, go the years back, if you could give yourself one piece of advice, if you were starting again today, what would that be?
Poof.
Tough one.
Uh, I'm gonna have to really think about this one, and I promise you, I'm going to put out a post hopefully over the next week or so. You just motivated it. What would I tell my 20-year-old self,
Yeah.
right? So I'll do that, and hopefully I'll get into more details. So I'd say be patient.
Yeah, 100%. Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was any business.
Yeah.
So I think such a good point there. Lewis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
You're a
you.
super interesting guy, amazing entrepreneur, so much exciting stuff going on. Where can people find you in the business? Where can they find the book? Tell us a little bit about all of that.
So myself on LinkedIn, Luis Luis. So it's spelled the Latin American way, not the American or British way. Uh, Luis dot Derechin or Luis Derechin on LinkedIn. LD at nearyou.com is my email, and I try to answer all the emails that I get sent, although I'm sure after this I'll probably get spammed a whole lot more, but it doesn't matter. Ultimately, this is about creating value. Uh, the book, if you go onto the company's website, nir-yu.com, near you, spelled phonetically. Uh, there you can find it on Amazon. It'll be available on Amazon. It'll be available on Audible because the audio version is coming out. I think that's it.
Amazing, amazing. As I say, I would recommend and urge everyone to pick up that book as soon as it comes out. As I say, I know I will be. And yeah, just before we close off here, thank you again, Lewis. Really appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll keep in contact for sure.
Oh, and it is I who thanks you for your time and your interest, and I too look forward to staying in touch.
Amazing.
All right, my friend. Take care.